Hello, my name is JC Marr, and I'd like to welcome you to the first episode of Darker Hours, an anthology series of spine-tingling stories to keep you afraid of the dark. I'd also like to invite you to send your own horror short stories to us for a chance to have your chilling tale in the anthology. Just send your wicked yarns to www.darkerhoursanthology@gmail.com. Our first story was written by myself and involves a man who cannot escape his nightmares. This is The Damned Dream. It's the same damn dream every night. I'm lying on my back in pitch blackness. I look around, searching for a light, any luminescence to comfort my mind. I try to turn my head to the left, but my neck is stiff and difficult to move. I strain my eyes to see further, but they're only swallowed by more of nothing. Something in the dark is ripping open the skin of my abdomen, stringing out my intestines, tearing at my bloody innards like a kid curious about the insides of a baseball. I try to move, but my body is bolted to the floor. Excruciating pain rips through my stomach again. The unseen predator moves up my body until it's staring me in the face. Two oily black eyes with thin pale white circles around them, like two eclipses dancing together in a sea of black, glares at me. The creature gets close enough to my face for me to see large fangs snarling at me, ready to rip my vocal cords out, preventing my screams from escaping my throat. That's when I wake up, dripping with sweat even on this frosted autumn morning. The sheets were balled up in a clump beneath my feet. Maybe I was trying to kick the creature off of me in my sleep, I thought as I reached down below my knees and pulled the covers back over me. The blue neon-colored letters on my bedside alarm clock read 3:15 a.m. The alarm wouldn't go off for another 3 hours. Even if it were impossible, I laid back down and attempted to get more sleep. Every night the past few weeks I had two options: a sleepless night or that nightmare. Always in the dark, and always the same two eyes staring into mine, almost looking past me, like I could see the meat just below my skin. Hello, my name is David Warren, and I have a problem coping with my dreams. Nightmares that won't go away. No matter how hard I try to run, I'm always nailed to that floor in the dark. Looking at the big empty spot at the foot of my bed brought back the horrible memory of what happened 3 months ago. A memory I desperately tried to keep out of my mind. It's a great way to put on someone's back and heart to see your own dog, the only thing in this world you cared about, struck in the head by a speeding vehicle and killed instantly. A pet that lived out a full life of happiness and died peacefully is already a heavy enough loss on somebody. But Marvin, I called him Marv for short, was only 2 years old when the F-250 hit him so hard it sent him spinning around on the asphalt in front of me. I ran to him and drug him by his collar off to the side of the road, falling down just as I reached the grass. Marv's body landed in my lap, his blood soaking my jeans. I didn't need to have gone to a veterinary school to know he was already dead. His left ear and most of the scalp on that side were missing, probably still stuck to the grill of the hit-and-runner's truck. Bloody cracked bone was all that was left. I held him in my lap until the tears stopped rolling down my cheeks, and then carried him to the backyard. I didn't tell anyone about it. Never said a word about the truck or what happened to my beloved pet. I dug a hole and took care of my business. I spent the remainder of that day with a blank expression on my face. The TV was on, though I never caught a single word of what the people on it were saying. My heart was broken in half by the unthinkable, and I was left to hold the two halves until someday they would heal back together. The random acts that bring us to where we end up can be cruel-hearted, cold and distant, unthinking. The sky grew darker later that morning on my way to work. Rain clouds gathered over the mountaintops that surrounded Nocturnal Falls, the town I've lived in since moving away from Portland a few years ago. I never attended Northern Oregon State University, only working there as an accountant in a little cubicle in the administration building. The 4x4 foot space I call my second home is where I spend half of my waking hours. The river that ran alongside the front of the university's entrance reflected the ghostly clouds above it. Little expanding ripples dotted the slowly flowing water. Fresh graffiti painted on the side of the bridge's stonework read, Do the damned dream of greener pastures, in a vibrant green lettering with a purple outline. I wish my dreams took place in pastures, or anywhere at all other than the hellish midnight world they currently resided in. Below and to the right of the first sentence, further spray-painted wall exclaimed, "Let's do the time warp again," fashioned in orange and white. I had no idea current students were familiar with classic dances from Transylvania, but hey, I grew up in the 90s listening to the Beatles. I suppose good taste doesn't always die with younger generations. The dean of the college had been attempting to clean up the campus, threatening to suspend, or worse, expel any students caught vandalizing campus property, especially graffiti. Security must have flipped shit when they saw this, I said to myself. My truck's heat finally began to take effect moments before I pulled into the parking lot. The drive from my house on Collins Street to University Drive was approximately 5 minutes, almost short enough for the heat from the engine not to even bother flowing out of the register. I pulled onto University Drive, crossing the bridge over the river. At the entrance stood a large statue of a mountain and a cliffhanger holding onto the side of it with a climbing pick lodged in the rock. The words etched into the bottom read, "No summit is unreachable, with a determined heart at its base." I made it to my destination in my Tacoma, as the raindrops began to fall more steadily. It was a short walk to the entrance of the building, so I kept my head low and ran for the door as the ghost clouds began to pour out their contents onto the campus. Friday morning crept on and on. The clock on my computer screen seemed to move at half speed. The building I worked in was one of the first built on the campus back in the 30s when the school was established. Although they did regular upkeep and maintenance on the infrastructure, the heating and air were severely outdated. It was always warm in the summer and a little chilly in the fall and winter. It wasn't unusual to see your breath on some very cold mornings. I was on the verge of finishing email responses to various bosses when I noticed something move in the hallway out of the corner of my vision. I looked up from the monitor to see a light brown dog standing by a potted plant, staring at me. My first thought was how a dog could have made it up the stairs or even onto the elevator without being noticed. That thought was immediately disturbed by a more pressing one. This was my dog, Marvin, the one I had buried 3 months ago in my backyard. His left ear and scalp were still gone, and blood streamed from the exposed skull down his face and off his chin, making a mesmerizing dripping noise on the wood flooring. My mind didn't know how to comprehend the signals it was receiving from my eyes. I sat there in my office chair for a few moments, just staring at my dead dog, who now appeared to be fully alive, albeit with half a scalp missing from his face. I was shaken out of my daze by Shelley, my cubicle neighbor. She had poked her head over the wall, concerned by my keyboard's lack of clacking. "Hey, Davy. It got awful quiet over here. You having trouble with Minesweeper this morning? I know you don't. Hey, are you okay?" I could barely hear Shelley's voice from just a couple feet behind me. I was too focused on my resurrected canine growling at me with exposed, bloody teeth. A few seconds later, I felt a tapping on my shoulder and I jumped. "Hello? Dave, what's wrong? You don't see that bloody dog beside the plant over there?" I said as I turned around. Shelley's face held skepticism, one eyebrow cocked exaggeratedly high. "You know you're going to be fired if they do a drug test, right? Lay off the LSD, would you? You're the only fun person to talk to around here. Well, most days anyway." Shelley always had a sarcastic sense of humor, cute most of the time, coming from a little blonde 30-something-year-old woman. But not this time. This time there was a hint of worry in her voice. "Right over there!" I turned around and looked, ignoring her comment, but all I saw was the potted plant. I jerked up from the swivel chair fast enough to send it slamming into my cubicle wall behind me and looked around the office. A few of my coworkers stood up to see what was going on. I darted my eyes from the potted plant to the stairwell in the corner and from there to the elevators. I turned my head 360 degrees, but there was no dog in sight. I looked back to where it had been standing. Not even the blood pouring out of his head onto the floor was there. It was as if the dog had vanished, cleaning up his own blood before disappearing. "You're not funny, David. You know how much I love dogs," Shelley said with a hint of anger in her voice. I had only wished I was joking. The room wasn't too cold when I first got there, but it felt 10 degrees colder after I saw Marvin. I began to shiver as I started typing again. That night was the same as all the others. As soon as I drifted off to sleep, the nightmare returned. The same darkness, the same creature with eclipse eyes, the same sharp teeth eating the guts out of my stomach. This time I could see further in front of me, and I screamed in horror to find it was my own dog Marvin lapping up my blood and tearing my throat out. This time in the nightmare, the demon dog's head moved up from my throat and rubbed its exposed skull in my mouth, my tongue penetrated by the taste of copper and rot. Marvin lifted his head up and looked into my eyes. His mouth began to raise up at the corners, as if he was beginning to smile at me. And then I woke up. This time, however, it was only midnight. I couldn't bring myself to go back to sleep after that. If I saw Marvin's grin again, I knew I would go insane. I sat up in bed until the sun rose and shined through my bedroom windows. The only comfort I had that morning was that the weekend had arrived. The morning flew by in a daze. I could barely remember what I had for breakfast. I do remember gathering up my clothes and sweaty sheets from last night to bring to the laundromat. My washer broke last week and I hadn't taken the time to call somebody to fix it. I set off down the sidewalk with my laundry bag and detergent. The laundromat was only 2 blocks away on the corner of Bleecker and Main. I tried to walk when I could to save on gas. Walking, I heard, is also good for your health. I put my clothes in the washer when I got to Rico's laundromat and sat in front of the machine, watching the spin cycle. I began to doze off. As soon as I closed my eyes, I was back on the dark floor getting my skin ripped apart. I jolted back awake in my chair, almost falling onto the floor. I began to think I was going to need therapy to get rid of these nightmares. I couldn't fall asleep for a second without being tortured by Marvin, or his doppelganger. Why would my mind give me visions of him? Why couldn't I stop dreaming of death by my beloved canine? Unfamiliar eyes stared at me, but I kept my head down, not wanting to deal with the judgment I may or may not be receiving from those around me. I cupped my hands together and rubbed my face vigorously, trying to wipe the sleep away. That's when I saw Marvin again. He was right outside the window of the laundromat, with the same bloody appearance. This time, however, his eyes were eclipses. He snarled those red teeth at me and began to bark loudly in a husky, deep bellow that didn't sound like the Marvin I knew at all. Blood spattered on the window with each bark. I looked around, but no one was seeing what I was seeing. Was it even there? Is my mind so delusional I am seeing dead dogs in broad daylight, clear as day? I got up slowly and walked towards Marvin, who became more hysterical the closer I got. It reminded me of how he used to act when he was alive, only instead of excitement, this looked more like rage. I got close enough to see the pus and blood clumped in dry splotches on his head. Fresh blood started to ooze out of the wound. Marv suddenly rammed his head into the glass, hard enough to crack the window. I jumped back with a gasp, concern and horror filling my face. Now people were starting to look, but not at Marvin, at me, because no one could see it, because I was crazy. Forgetting my clothes entirely, I ran through the back entrance of the laundromat, hoping the demon dog wouldn't follow me into the alleyway. When I flung the door open, I wasn't met with dumpsters in the back of another building, but instead a cemetery. This isn't what's behind Rico's, my mind shouted at me. What the fuck is happening to me? I walked through the grass slowly, passing gray tombstones with flowers arranged neatly around some. It was mid-afternoon now. I came upon a funeral service with a dozen people standing around an open grave. The pallbearers had just begun to lower a black casket into its final resting place where it would rot and return to dust along with the body it contained. I saw Shelley, my coworker, among the attendees. She was crying, her attractive face muddled with streaks of eyeliner. She was wearing a dress I never saw her in before, a modest knee-length with black lace trimming. A sudden urge to comfort and hold her, wipe her tears away, came over me, even though I had no idea how I got into the graveyard. I recalled not remembering breakfast either, or getting home after work yesterday. I was prepared to sit down in that grass above the dozens of corpses below my feet and wait for the men in white coats to come and take me away, haha. A sob from Shelley broke that train of thought. I began to walk towards her when Marvin crept out from behind a crypt. I ran. I knew I couldn't outrun a dog, but my legs began sprinting anyway. My eyes remained fixed in front of me, not looking back to see how close he was. I ran away from Shelley and the rest of the service, determined to keep my dog away from them. I worked up my courage enough to look back, but Marv wasn't there anymore. Before I could slow down, however, the ground in front of me gave way and I fell suddenly over the ledge of a steep cliff. I landed on my head. I heard my neck crack, and my teeth shattering against each other. The pain was sickening. My stomach knotted up and my vision blurred. I was on my back, my eyes rolling up to the top of my head. I could barely make out the roof of my house directly above me. I had fallen off my roof, not off of a cliff. I had also heard my neck crack. That's when realization set in. I was dead. I died some time ago in an accident while retiling my roof. A section of tiles came loose and I slid backwards, falling 2 stories onto the top of my cranium. I died almost instantly. If I was dead, then why was I still walking around, going to work, having nightmares, ones I couldn't escape? Suddenly the sky above me went black. The trees darkened and turned to stems of charcoal instantly before my eyes. Before the nightscape took over my vision entirely, I could see a pterodactyl-like creature in the sky with a blood-red skull for a face. Off in the distance, a molten wind blew ash off the sides of tall mountains, like the snow on the peak of Mount Hood back in Oregon. Then all was dark. Something began to settle slowly into my tormented mind. Just like at the end of a dream when you realize you weren't awake but sleeping instead. Holding on to a dream after that is impossible. Soon you wake up. Only I woke up to a nightmare reality. Torment on repeat over and over. Death by Marvin. An endless torture I could never escape from, except when the pain became too great and my mind goes numb enough to hallucinate segments of my past. To dream. The damned do dream of greener pastures. Suddenly those eclipse eyes appeared in front of me. The demon dog's mouth opened to reveal its sharp fangs. The corners of his lips raised up slowly, almost as if to smile at me. Thank you guys for listening to the first episode of the anthology, Darker Hours. We'll be back soon with another episode.